This discussion of POP3 for Linux with the Dovecot software, SMTP for Windows using IIS, and SMTP for Linux using the Postfix software. This presentation is done by Mark Mosley for the ISA4220 class at Kennesaw State University in the spring 2016 semester. This presentation is done on February 21, 2016. The technical discussion for POP3 Linux Dovecot is that it is an open source email server designed primarily with security in mind, and it requires no special administration, and on a true technical side, it uses very little memory on the server that is installed in. Dovecot version 1.1 passes all IMAP server standard compliancy tests, whereas many other different servers running other POP3 softwares do not pass this IMAP server standard compliancy test. So this is very important if you're looking to be within standards. Authentication wise, Dovecot supports many different authentication databases and mechanisms, so you have your choice of what you wish or want to use with Dovecot. It also supports SMTP authentication without being configured separately. This is for Postfix 2.3 and newer users, and also for XM 4.4 or 4.64 and newer users. They both can do SMTP authentication directly against Dovecot's backend without having to configure it separately. Dovecot also supports easy migration from many existing IMAP and POP3 servers. Makes it easy to set up and install without having to do a lot of work. Now, of course, there are some differences with the softwares out there. So you do have some bugs in POP3 clients and IMAPs, but Dovecot does have workarounds for these. But some of these workarounds can cause your protocol exchange and hence your server to slow down. So you'd only want to turn on the workarounds that are a priority for your business. One of the neat features for Dovecot is under the administrative help. It is a self-healing software. So any error that the program notices by itself, it will try to fix. The key one of these is broken index files. Even if it does fix the problem, all problems, whether fixed or unfixed, are logged in an error file for an administrator to review. Error messages are also easy to read without a whole lot of technical jargon and filler that the standard user can't read, but also with links to more information if you're an administrator and need to get into the nitty-gritty of the error. Any crash is a bug by Dovecot standards, and it is sent back to them. Mailboxes and indexes can be modified by multiple users at the same time by users while the services are still running, so you don't have to shut down the mailbox to make modifications to it or to the indexing. It also supports folder structure and indexing that many clients are used to from the Windows POP3 systems. For the technical discussion of SMTP on Windows IIS, SMTP is a simple mail transfer protocol. It is part of the application layer of the TCP/IP protocol. It works with the mail transfer agent, MTA, to ensure that the email being sent is delivered to the right recipient. It handles the outbound portion of emails. So once you click on send, this is the procedure for how the email is transferred from your computer to the mail server and then on to its destination. The IIS portion of Windows is the Internet Information Services. This is the server portion of SMTP, the counterpart to Exchange for POP3 email. Has limitations on the number of emails that can be sent per user. These can be defined by your ISP, or it can be defined in the IIS server setup, or it could be both. And you can set the restrictions on number of emails per day, per hour, or number of recipients per email. Port 25 is the default port for SMTP. It can also operate on ports 2525 and 587. You need to operate on port 587 when you use TLS encryption for SMTP authentication, which is also one of the best practices. Technical discussion for SMTP on the Linux postfix. Postfix is the Linux version of IIS for Windows. Linux comes with SendMail as the default built-in email program. Postfix is a more secure version of the email server for Linux. Postfix has the ability to limit, not to stop, but to help limit denial of service attacks when it is properly configured. I'll say that again, when it is properly configured. In the TLS default settings have been changed recently, so it no longer enables export rigged ciphers and SSL version 2 and version 3 protocols. Best practices for POP3 in Linux Dovecot is to enable SMTP SSL, to update the IP tables to enable SSL traffic through the firewall. You need to update the IP tables to enable POP and IMAP ports from Dovecot through the firewall. You also want to install Dovecot onto a different hard drive from the operating system. And the reason you do this is because if your hard drive with the operating system crashes, you still have your email server and all of its settings. You can take this hard drive and put it into another computer, and your email server is back up within a matter of minutes. But if it's on the same hard drive as your operating system, well, now you've lost everything, and you have to rebuild your email server from scratch. And it's also for processing time and CPU resources. The operating system is going to require some of these. And you don't want it to sit and have to compete for the same amount of resources, CPU and memory. If it's on a different hard drive, you can give it different priorities and access levels. You also want to require user authentication with password to log in to the POP3 system. Best practices for SMTP Windows IIS is to require TLS encryption for SMTP authentication. This is a higher level of protection for your email server. Anybody can log in with the username and password, but if you actually have encryption on your outbound email, this will protect all email from your laptop, your desktop, to the email server with encryption. You also want to configure and enable outbound filtering policies that protect against spam. Configure alerts for SMTP authentication login failures, so you know if somebody's trying to hack into your outbound email server, or if somebody changed their password and didn't remember it, or some other issue. And then you also want to configure your SMTP mail server to only authenticate mail connections from certain IP addresses instead of all IP addresses. This is so that it only accepts outbound email from devices within your company, and not somebody from outside of your company who's gotten the address of your email server and is trying to hack in and use your email server as a spam bot and flood your company with porn, Viagra, a whole bunch of emails that you don't need, or send emails out to other people. Best practices for SMTP Windows. You also want to install IIS into a different hard drive from the operating system. You want to set a location for non-deliverable email notifications to be sent to. So if you send an email out and it doesn't get delivered, it's going to generate a non-deliverable email notification. Well, without specifying where this notification should be sent to, it's going to sit on the server and no one in your company is going to know that the email wasn't delivered. So having these sent to an administrator, a security analyst, an IT help desk technician, just some email that is checked regularly, not once a week, but pretty much real time, so you can see why emails are not going out. You also want to move bad mail folder to a separate location or forward the bad mail to a deliverable POP address to reduce server load. Bad mail is a collection point on the server for anything that is really bad mail. This would be a collection of your spam, virus mail, and other stuff like that. So if you just leave it on the server, it's going to build, it's going to build, it's going to build. You can move it to a different location on the server so it's not in the main process area and slowing down the entire email server. Or you can have it all forward to a download email address so you can review it as needed. You can also set limitations to help prevent server overload at one time. You can limit the number of messages per connection, limit number of receipts per message, limit message size. Then you also want to enforce antivirus scanning of all emails. This is to help prevent anything going out of your network from being a virus and spreading infections to other people. The SMTP best practices are pretty much the exact same of Windows. The only difference is how you do it and the ability to limit denial of service attacks. How to implement best practices for POP3 Dovecot. To enable SMTP SSL, you need to open the file main.cf that is in the postfix folder under etc, and then you will add the following lines of code that you see on the screen. And once you've added those lines of code, you're going to exit this main.cf file and restart the postfix service. And this way you have just enabled SMTP SSL encryption for your email server. You also want to update the IP tables to allow SSL traffic through your firewall, and you see the command line right there. And if you're doing a brand new install or your firewall isn't, or your email server isn't working properly, these are the ports that need to be open for each type of POP and IMAP traffic. Best practices for Windows IIS using SMTP, requiring TLS encryption. All of the Windows steps are, not all of them, most of them are long and complicated. So we're talking 10, 20 step processes. So a bit long for me to list out in detail here in this presentation. So that way I have linked to each article provided from Symantec on how to create these procedures. First one, requiring TLS encryption for SMTP authentication. Second one is configuring and enabling outbound filtering policies that protect against spam. Third one is configuring alerts for SMTP authentication login failures. Fourth one is requiring specific IP addresses instead of all IP addresses when you configure the SMTP mail server for authentication. And then how to prevent overloads on the server. This is, remember we were talking size of message, number of message per connections, and other options. They are all done in the same place. So you access the SMTP virtual server's property window, open the IIS manager, right click on the server and select properties, select the messages tab, and then you change what options you want to change. Press apply and OK to save the changes and exit. And then here you see my reference for this. Are there any questions?